starting from understanding these new skills in depth. The first, King's Aura. My second oldest skill, Ryuk mused silently to himself. Not a skill you use very often, the system said, and to that, he had no choice but to reluctantly agree. That's correct. King's Aura is one of the skills I used the least, and I barely even upgraded it. It's still only LV1 even after all this time. And what's the reason behind that? The system asked. Ryuk thought about it quietly for a minute before replying. Because I had too many skills previously. King's Aura is an intimidation skill that also helps bolster Isha and Void's strength. But I barely used it. And that's because I had a plethora of different skills that were just more effective in dealing with combat situations compared to King's Aura. That's the sole reason why I almost forgot its existence, Ryuk admitted, nailing the exact reason, but his heart steeled. But this time, I'll take a different path. My previous path was about having too many skills, most of them still only at level 1, activated all at once to boost my physical stats. In short, I had quantity, but not quality. Stacking too many skills truly improves power, but it also causes strain, and truly mastering a single one becomes nearly impossible. But now, with just 4 skills, I can focus solely on each and grasp their fundamental concepts. Ryuk mused, finding a new light and path in the darkness that had enveloped him. For that reason, he ordered, "Hey system." Yes. Input 49 ability upgrade cards into King's Aura. Ability upgrade order has been given. Initiating upgrade sequence. 49 ability upgrade cards recognized. Upgrade complete. Stabilizing path. 1%, 25%, 49%, 76%, 95%. Upgrade completed. Congratulations, host, on upgrading King's Aura to level 50. King's Aura, LV. 50. Type, Beast Sovereign Skill. Mode, Passive-Active Hybrid. Description, an overwhelming sovereign presence that radiates from the host, instilling dominance across the battlefield. Every heartbeat from the Beast Sovereign resonates with primal command, pushing his bonded beasts to ferocity while cowing enemies into submission. Plus 200% attack power to all bonded beasts. Enemy beasts within range suffer minus 50% morale, with an increased chance of retreat or disobedience, based on how weak each beast is compared to the user. Wild beasts are drawn to the host with a significantly higher chance to submit, even without combat. Bonus trait, Beast Magnetism. The host radiates a natural pull on all untamed creatures. Beasts instinctively view the host as an apex existence, not just a master, but a king. Beast King Edict. The host becomes the embodiment of a primal law, one that compels all beasts within range of the host's aura to obey any command issued instantly. Only beasts of ancestral level or higher may attempt to resist, and even then they must succeed in a will clash against the user's beast authority. Excellent. This is the highest skill level of all the skills I've ever possessed, and the effects are very good too, Ryuk mused to himself. The highest he remembered he had ever upgraded a skill at once was level 30, but he had upgraded King's Aura to level 50. With this, perhaps he could even command beasts without needing to contract them, and what's more, they could not disobey, while his contracted beasts would gain a powerful 200% boost upon activation. I'll find a chance to try it out soon, he thought before moving to the other skill tabs. My next skill is the Sovereign Rewriting, a skill I got from the Anunnaki model fused with me by High Scholar Emeries. He recalled. It was the skill that allowed him to collapse objects by altering the bonds that made them what they were, and also restructure energy attacks sent toward him to rebound back at the attacker. A good defensive skill, but now it had reached its max level. Surprisingly, I've only gotten one skill from this Anunnaki model. I wonder if there are requirements I need to fulfill to acquire other skills. Or is this the only one that comes with this model? Ryuk pondered. His previous Anunnaki model came with skills like Abyssal Nano Reaper, Anunnaki Oblivion, and more, but this one had only a single skill. He didn't know the reason, but couldn't afford to dwell on it too much. Since the skill was already maxed out, there was nothing more to do but familiarize himself with it when he had the chance. Even at just level 30, it could already rewrite techniques. At its current max level, he had no idea what it could truly be capable of, but he was expectant. With that out of the way, he moved on to the next skill. I awakened 2 skills from the new Beyonder Dragon bloodline. The first is the Beyonder Dragon transformation, which I activated during my fight with Elder Nagarasuk. Reading through it now, it finally makes sense why I could overpower him with just one strike. Upon activation, all of my stats are automatically boosted to 20,000, a level which places me firmly in the mid-Exignis stage. No cultivator below Apocrypha stage should be able to resist that. And it also has a command skill called Beyond? He thought, recalling the moment when he had shouted halt, and all the remaining elders had halted. I must have been using the skill back then. No doubt about it, this Beyonder Dragon skill is very powerful, even now when it's only at level 1. How powerful would it be if I upgraded it to level 30? Or 40? Or, just to match King's aura, upgraded it all the way to level 50? He wondered. The idea sparked excitement in him, and in that very moment he made his choice. Hey, system. Yes, host. Input 49 level up cards into the Beyonder Dragon skill. Ability upgrade order has been given. Initiating upgrade sequence. 49 ability upgrade cards recognized. Upgrade complete. Stabilizing path. 1%, 25%, 49%, 76%, 95%. Upgrade completed. Congratulations, host, on upgrading Beyonder Dragon to level 50. Beyonder Dragon, LV. 50. Type, Bloodline Core Skill. Mode, Passive/Active. User, confirmed bearer of an erased Transcendent Dragon lineage. Description. This skill has fully awakened the ancient power sealed within the user's bloodline. Finalized effects. Base stat override instantly raises all of the user's physical and mental stats to 50,000 if they're lower during battle. Fate lock, absolute threading, passive, ensures the user's chosen actions succeed unless directly countered by a superior concept to beyond. Presence compression. Event horizon mode severely weakens enemies within 5 meters by stripping their resistances, slowing them, clouding their minds, and auto-failing all skills below Apocrypha rank. Beyond Origin Breath, active skill. User releases a breath that erases all buffs and enhancements from enemies, including those from weapons, armors, artifacts, or formations, unless of the divine artifact tier or higher. Drains massive amounts of hurricane energy per minute. Using this skill without abundant hurricane energy may result in life force deprivation. Hey, system. Yes, host. Can you recreate the table of stats to power level ratio in the form of a tab? He asked, and quickly, a new set of panels appeared. Stats to power level ratio tab. Initial Eternity Stage. Perfection Eternity Stage power level ratio. 500. 1000. Initial Apocrypha Stage. Perfection Apocrypha Stage power level ratio. 1000. 10,000. Initial Exignis Stage. Perfection Exignis Stage power level ratio. 10,000. 50,000. Right now, the majority of my physical stats are at 10,000. Having lost my Apex and Aetheris energy cultivation, it's now accurate that I'm fully at the perfection stage of Apocrypha, or the initial level of Exignis. But if I activate the upgraded Beyonder Dragon skill, I should be placed at the perfection Exignis stage power level, Ryuk muttered. In his heart, there was a faint shock at how much the technique could make him grow, but in response, he clenched his fist even tighter when the realization hit him. Losing his 2 original bloodlines didn't make him weaker. No, it made him stronger, and gave him a chance to embark on a new and stable path of cultivation and growth toward power. But he reined in the feeling, focusing on the caution introduced. But the skills also drain a large amount of hurricane energy, and could drain even my life force if used without it. I need to be more careful about that, since I have no idea if the new bloodline in me replenishes my life essence, or if I will need the previous 2 to get one. Better to play it safe, Ryuk thought silently to himself. How many people in Amamura were at the Exignis stage, talkless of the perfection of it? He couldn't name one but himself, and that gave him deep confidence. I'll also need to check it out soon, he thought, before moving to the second skill he got from the Beyonder Dragon. One that interested him the most. Echo Library. The technique seemed to lean more into information about the hurricane energy, he mused, the corner of his gaze looking at the shimmering purple tattoo around him. He had a lot of questions about it, and for that reason, he moved away from his sitting position, lying properly on the bed, head turned to the ceiling. His heartbeat slowed down, and then his lips moved. Activate Echo Library. The moment the words were spoken, the shimmering purple in his eyes and tattoos lit up brilliantly. Then his eyes slowly shut, although his purple tattoos remained, gleaming with brilliant light. Ryuk felt himself dragged away from his conscious body and pulled into the darkness, but it didn't persist for very long. Soon, he opened his eyes to a familiar sight. It was a void dark, but with motes of shimmering purple and white hanging around. Isn't this my soul space? He wondered aloud as he looked around, but was quite surprised when he didn't find her here. The bloodline manifestation of the Beyonder Dragon was nowhere to be found, revealing to Ryuk that perhaps this place was a separate area of the soul space. Turning his gaze around, there didn't seem to be anything special about the place, just the void and the mingling lights of white and purple. But that was only until he raised his head up and watched as two objects floated downward toward him. In this empty void, they were more than eye-catching, and Ryuk took 2 steps backward and watched the objects eventually arrive before him, pausing at his eye level. Are these grimoires? He mused to himself, looking at the objects. And truly, both were hard-covered books, better named grimoires. On one of the books, there was the cover of a snow wasteland. One which was so familiar to Ryuk, his heart shook. A frosty wasteland with towering mountains, and the faint runic symbol that was on the floor of the wasteland, resembling a frost wyvern form. This is my frost domain expansion, Winter's Solace image, he realized. And then he turned his gaze to the second grimoire. This one was in a pitch-black cover, but in this pitch darkness, there was the silhouette of a broken star held by gigantic chains, along with a throne situated beneath. The image was one Ryuk could never forget. And this is my void domain expansion, Throne of the Dying Star image. Could it be? He wondered, and that was when the golden panel flashed before him. New skill unlocked, Echo Library. Description: the Echo Library is a metaphysical construct embedded in your soul star, a special area of the soul space. It stores resonance memories, echoes of energies, elements, and skills that left a significant imprint on your soul. One of which is your frost and void energy, as you are still bonded with Isha and void, allowing for the imprint to remain. Although you can no longer circulate Apex Frost or Void energy natively, you may still access their core signatures through resonance. Warning: activation requires vivid memory of the element's feel, structure, or technique. Through the principle of imitation, your hurricane essence may emulate abilities stored in the Echo Library. In short, if you remember the art, skills, or technique clear enough, and it is imprinted and anchored to your soul, you can imitate and hence use it. I understand, Ryuk muttered to himself as he finished going through the system's explanations. So the Echo Library has the same function as the Primordial Gate. But unlike the Primordial Gate that allows me to properly cultivate Apex energy using that huge tree within, allowing me to progress through its cultivation levels, Echo Library doesn't allow me to cultivate it from scratch. Instead, it simply requires me to get a feel of what I want, and then it will actively work toward imitating that feeling as closely as possible. And then it recreates it. Ryuk said aloud, and the panel reappeared. You nailed it. It's pretty easy to understand after your explanation. But then, Ryuk thought as his hand reached for the grimoire closest to him, the void one. Just how far can an imitation go? He wondered aloud as his fingers touched the book. The second he felt its warmth, it let out a brilliant flash of light, making him snap his eyes shut. I'm back, he wondered aloud, looking at himself lying on the bed. But then he turned to his left hand, and in it was the void grimoire. Sitting up in the bed, his heart faintly thumped as he swerved open the first page, but his brows knitted. He proceeded to swipe open the second page, then the third, fourth, and fifth. Soon enough, he had swerved through all the pages until he reached the end of the grimoire. It's blank. He had swiped through 30 or so pages, blank white sheets. His expression fell quickly, but then an idea crossed his mind. Wait, I'm missing something, he muttered, returning to the blank page one. As the system explained, so far as I remember the technique or art or skill clearly enough, then I should be able to imitate it. Perhaps I'll need to feel the art first and get the sequence right. Only then will it appear on the pages, he thought, and without wasting another second, he rose to his feet. Eyes slowly shut, the small grimoire resting in his right palm, while his left palm stretched outward. He tried to imagine it, the most basic of the void skills he could recall. He soon found what he wanted, and then his attention began magnifying it. The key was to pretend, to trick himself that he still had void apex energy within him, and then act like he was trying to conjure a technique with it. It didn't take up to 10 seconds when his hair and clothes began gently flapping. The breeze from the outside was slowly being drawn into his room, the curtains fluttering wildly. At the tip of his outstretched left hand was a tiny hole that continuously rotated, the source of the disturbance. Ryuk's eyes remained closed, his expression calm. The tiny hole in the room rapidly expanded, growing larger and larger until it became a massive 5-meter-tall vortex that stretched to the ceiling. When he opened his eyes, he opened them to the sight of the howling forceful breeze, along with the conjured vortex in the air. But then something caught his eye, at the corner of his vision. He turned to look at the grimoire and found that on its pages, an image was rapidly being drawn. It was the exact image of the vortex before him. Without wasting a second more, Ryuk took a step forward, appearing before the void vortex and stepped into it, only to disappear out of the room. When next he opened his eyes, "Damn!" he cursed out loud as he looked at a creature that seemed to be a mix of a horse and a beast, rapidly galloping towards him, its eyes shining brighter than a bus light. Immediately, he stepped to the side, instantly appearing 10 meters away. "Hey! Watch it, kid!" the voice shouted at him. None other than the carriage driver, who flashed him a threatening gaze as he pulled the carriage along. The carriage sped along as Ryuk took a couple more steps, coming to stand by the roadside. He got a few bizarre gazes from the night-working Fallens who eyed him weirdly. They had no idea where the tattooed young man had come from at all. It was like he had suddenly appeared in the middle of the road, and the way he had dodged getting run over was mind-numbing. It was like a flash of light, and then he was gone, appearing at the side. Ryuk didn't mind the gazes. It was currently nighttime, making it even less likely for those who were looking at him to pay him much attention. Even though it was night, the streets were still bustling so loudly, as if it were day. Seems like my void vortex was a little off, Ryuk thought to himself, scratching the back of his head helplessly. He looked around him, and it took less than 5 seconds for him to locate his house. He had planned for the vortex to take him to the roof, but it had thrown him 3 kilometers away, in the middle of the road, almost getting him run over. "I'll just try one more time," he muttered, and the next second, the grimoire opened once more as he thrust his hands outward, rotating it in a circular motion to create another vortex. He stepped into it and disappeared. When next he reappeared, the shrill scream was like a pig being slaughtered as Ryuk turned behind him, where the source of the noise came from, and the scene made his jaw drop. Holy mother of sweet monkey milk. "Honey!" It was a scream for help, and a second later, the door was barged in, showing a hefty, muscular-looking. "Hey, what's wrong?" the man said, but soon saw Ryuk at the corner of his gaze. You pervert. Spying on my wife? Got a death wish? I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Ryuk screamed as he quickly raced away from the toilet, chased after by the man. He found the window open and jumped through it, barely escaping an inch from his legs being grabbed. "Damn!" the man cursed, looking at the young man who was sent flying down from the top of the building. 500 meters into the air, but just before he could watch slam into the ground, a void vortex suddenly conjured, and the boy disappeared into it, fading away from view. Just who is that? When Ryuk opened his eyes after disappearing into the vortex, he was lucky enough to find himself standing, his feet anchored firmly to the ground. But as he looked around, he realized he was in a dark alleyway. A familiar smell filled the air, the smell of smoking, and when he turned his head, he caught sight of a group of hairy-looking Fallens. Golden eyes mixed with red, flashing in the deep darkness, cigarette butts glowing between their fingers. Their hazy eyes locked onto Ryuk, pupils dilated, clearly high out of their minds. Ryuk instinctively took 3 steps backward. "Hey! Stop right there." One of them began, but before they could finish, a void vortex materialized behind Ryuk, and he disappeared into it. When he reappeared this time, he was high in the sky and began plummeting. Luckily, he landed on a rooftop. Finally got the location right, he thought to himself, exhaling in relief, the glow of his tattoos anchoring him securely atop the roof. But then he looked forward, and the relief on his face vanished. He was standing on the wrong roof. Not his house, but the one beside it. Not willing to waste any more time, Ryuk stepped forward, slipped through the glass window, and landed back on the bed. It worked. The system notification flashed before Ryuk, who rolled his eyes at its outsider tone. "I tried to create a void vortex, and it did what it was supposed to do. Get me out of the room." "Oh really? Then why were you sneaking in through the window in the dead of night?" "Okay, fine. It isn't working 100% perfectly, but I'm guessing I just need to flesh things out. I mean, the first time I got the skill from Void, I wasn't an expert at it. I'm guessing this is the same. A couple more attempts, and I'll get it right," Ryuk said with more than enough confidence as the grimoire faded from his grasp, returning to his soul star. It would have been the perfect time to check out the Frost grimoire, but he didn't think that was necessary anymore. He had gotten what he needed, proof that the Echo Library functioned similarly to the Primordial Gate. If he could feel what he wanted clearly enough, then he could imitate it. But getting that feeling right wouldn't be easy. He would need to train, to meditate, to resonate deeply with memory. And that he was perfectly fine with. "I'll be going to the Amamoran Service Center tomorrow, and I'm not sure yet what I'll be facing. Will they place me in service straight away? Or will I have to go through another test? I don't know, but probably best to go there feeling alive rather than exhausted," he murmured, deciding to call it a night. Quietly, he slipped under the mattress, clicked off the lamp, and the room fell into a quiet calm. The breeze still faintly rushed in through the slits of the window, but through the quiet silence, a pair of purple eyes remained open. One of his fingers traced down the purplish tattoo on his right arm, his thoughts drifting. Mostly, they drifted back to his last conversation with the manifestations of his previous bloodlines. "I'm not nothing without you both, and I'll carve a path. My path. Away from the names and titles your presence forced on me. I'll be Ryuk, Ryuk Null. Not the son of Thaithvorgith, nor one who shared a line with the daughter of Velsryaka. But Ryuk Null," he swore silently. "I'll make you both realize that when next we meet. I swear it." On. "Look who's looking refined this morning. Even got a pair of glasses on? Don't you think he looks cute, Ryuk?" The bubbly, feminine voice teased, laughter laced beneath her words. Ryuk turned to the man sitting across from him, a leave-me-alone look in his eyes, though a smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. He looks like a true civilized man," he exclaimed. Old Jack scoffed at the hypocrisy. "You just..." The familiar, ear-grating noise of a horse rang out from outside as a sturdy animal cautiously trotted toward the window, revealing a carriage standing outside. "Seems like your ride is here, honey," Mrs. Linnea alerted, just as old Jack took the last slice of food left on his plate and rose to his feet. "Wait, let me..." He paused as she wiped his oily lips with a tissue before kissing him. "Don't be late and don't cause trouble. You know I'm not a troublemaker, Linnea," old Jack said with a sleek smile, but his wife's doubtful expression made him sigh. A faint sound of mocking laughter echoed from the side. None other than Ryuk, with his big purple eyes sparkling mischievously. Seems like my reputation ain't the best. The horse neighed again, prompting old Jack to wave. I'll be back in the evening. Early, of course. I promise, he said, quickly heading out the door. Bye, Big Eyes Mutt. Don't die on your first service, he called out before Ryuk shouted after him. Break a leg, oldie. For the last time, I'm not old, Jack yelled back just before jumping into the carriage. The sound of heavy hooves hitting the ground rang out as the carriage disappeared into the distance. A beam of golden light glinted in Mrs. Linea's eyes as she stared at the panel for a while. Your ride is coming soon, too, Ryuk. It'll be here in a couple of minutes. I got a little bit of info about your service. Stored it all on this, she said, taking a seat by his side and extending her thumb toward Ryuk. On the surface was something that looked like an iris cover, shaped like a pair of glasses. Wait, is that? Yeah, the Amemoran communication device. Just place it over your eyeballs and you should be good to go, she said. I'll help you, she added, turning Ryuk's face to hers, making sure it was in place before she extended the covering forward. Are you sure it's safe and doesn't blind people eventually? Just hold still, and done. Ryuk blinked a couple of times, feeling the whirring in his ears, and then it flashed before him. A set of panels, their controls seemingly linked directly to his mind. There was a welcoming note, along with a quick manual for operating the device, and mentions of neural waves for communication. The information was transmitted directly into his brain, but a few bubbly notification panels soon appeared, hovering playfully at the side. One held information about the Amemoran Service Center, the location where he was to appear. The other displayed an app that showed a ride had already been booked for him and was counting down on its estimated arrival time. There were many things to note, but Mrs. Linea's voice pulled him out of it. Just go through the notes on your way. It's not much, but it should help familiarize you with the procedures. I created a joint account for the family, so there are some funds, just in case you see something that interests you or to book a taxi back home. Mrs. Linea, and yes, don't spend too much time wallowing with strangers. I've heard some weird rumors are currently circulating the Amemoran Service Archguards. Cases of some of them going missing or something. She paused, her voice lowering slightly. I know you're stronger than the average Archguard, but please be careful, okay? Ryuk could see the worry in her eyes, but he reassured her with a confident smile. I'll be fine. The sound of a bird cawing echoed as Ryuk noticed the Amemoran panel flash at the edge of his vision, alerting him that his ride had arrived. Gotta go, Mrs. Linea, he said with a small nod of gratitude. Thank you for helping with everything. Don't mention it, she replied, following him to the exit. Outside, the Golden Ammonius stood waiting, along with its driver, who gave Ryuk a silent nod. Ryuk began to approach the mount, but to the driver's surprise, the flying beast lowered itself before Ryuk, inviting him to climb on without yet being signaled by him. It was a little detail that he eventually shrugged off as maybe a beast's instinct. He quickly climbed atop the beast and the bird let out a piercing call before flapping its wings and soaring into the sky. Ryuk stared down as Mrs. Linea waved up at him. He waved back, watching her continue waving until he was out of view. You seem pretty nervous around her. The system's notification flashed before his gaze as Ryuk exhaled. Yeah, I am. Why? I'm just not used to being treated like that. She loves me, I can feel that. Yet it feels so different from the bond one had with Morgaine. It's called motherly love. Don't worry, you'll eventually get used to it. Maybe. Now, let's take a closer look at this Amemoran tech thingy. Ryuk thought, focusing on the implanted device over his eye. It was unlike Indurtha's communication devices, which were usually flat screens held in the hand and accessed with fingers. This was more complex, directly placed over his eye and operated using neural waves and mind commands rather than fingers. After a few minutes of experimenting, he finally got the hang of it. It was relatively simple to control, and its features were very similar to Indertha's devices. It had apps like phone logs, which currently only had 2 contacts stored, one labeled Mom, and another labeled Greedy Old Bastard, clearly saved by Mrs. Linnea herself. A small chuckle tugged at his lips. Talk about partiality, the system teased, and Ryuk smiled. But then his brow furrowed slightly. She didn't save Morgaine's number? Could she have forgotten? Or does Morgaine not have a number at all? He wondered. What's the deal with her being a chosen and staying at the Dominaire grounds anyway? Is it like a school? A training program? The system asked curiously, but Ryuk had no answer. He didn't know what it meant to be a chosen, only that Morgaine was selected to be one, apparently due to her high bloodline concentration. As for how that related to her title or what being a family's chosen really meant, he was clueless. I'll just ask Mrs. Linnea when I get back, he decided, placing the thought at the back of his mind. Now more familiar with the tech, he tried to skim through the Amemoran service notes that had been sent to him. But then, a voice cut through the air. So, I'm guessing this is your first time resuming for the service, sir? Asked the Ammonius driver. A young man, seemingly in his late 20s, half turned to glance at Ryuk. Yes, first day on the job, Ryuk replied. The man laughed. Knew it. Ryuk tilted his head slightly. Do I reek of that newbie smell or something? The driver grinned. No, not that. I know plenty of individuals much younger than you who are already in service, especially among outsider races. It's more common than you think. Then how? We have data, you see. Info on how many Amemoran service workers are present in each district. That caught Ryuk's attention. You have data on that? Yeah. Amemoran workers get a 20% discount on their rides. Don't worry, we're reimbursed by the Flight Association. So if someone uses that discount, the driver explained, they're most likely in the service. And you, sir, are the first to use that code from your district. Ryuk nodded in understanding. At first, he'd been worried that the identity of service workers might be public, but this made sense. I understand now. Just a couple more minutes and we'll be there. You're early, sir. At least 20 minutes ahead, if things stay smooth. Good to know, Ryuk replied with a nod before turning his attention back to the notes, quickly skimming through them. Silence reigned for the remainder of the journey until they finally arrived at their destination. The Amemoran Service Center, a large expanse of land, seemingly a mini-city of its own. The Ammonius descended from the sky, halting before what looked like a smaller gate. This is as far as we Ammonius drivers are allowed, the driver said to Ryuk, who slid off the golden bird. It gave a low call, and Ryuk felt a small smile slip onto his lips as he hugged its head gently. Thank you for the ride, he said before turning his back and walking off. Even though he said thank you for the ride, why do I feel like he was communicating with the Ammonius? The driver muttered, a bizarre expression crossing his face as he looked at the golden bird. Ammons were usually prideful beasts that rarely bonded deeply with Fallens. Sure, they could be bought and trained for riding, but this was something different. He'd owned this Ammonius for 3 years, and not once had it behaved this affectionately, even toward him. He turned again toward Ryuk, only to find that he'd vanished from sight. He's quite the strange one. There were 2 gates. A smaller one, where Ammonius drivers dropped off Amemoran service workers. There were guards stationed above, but no scanners. Workers entered in steady groups, 2s and 3s, murmurs and greetings filling the air. Ryuk felt a slight nervousness in his chest. After all, it had been a long time since he'd been in such a large crowd. His ability to hear every single word being spoken simultaneously was deeply unsettling. But thankfully, his mind could process it all without getting overwhelmed. I'll have to get used to this, he told himself, taking a deep breath before standing upright and making his way to the larger gate that everyone else seemed to be heading toward. It was about 10 kilometers away from the first gate, and instead of a single entrance, there were 3 each separated by about 500 meters. The closer he got, the more he realized just how massive the structure was. He picked the central one, the closest, and as he approached he began to notice a pattern. Each Amamoran service worker would stop before a golden platform beneath the gate. An almost invisible layer of golden light would surround them. Then, they'd raise their service card high above their heads using their right hands and remain still for 3 seconds. Only then would they pass through the entrance, which was guarded by a glowing golden barrier, presumably to reject those who didn't meet the requirements. Ryuk summoned his card from the system shop, the object appearing instantly in his hand. He stepped up onto the platform and waited. The subtle hum of golden particles whirled around him as they scanned his presence. Then he raised the card above his head. 3 seconds passed, but nothing happened. The golden barrier remained sealed in front of him. It took 7 full seconds before the golden veil parted. Only then did Ryuk walk forward, disappearing into the entrance. Stepping through it felt like walking into an entirely different world. A world unervingly gigantic. The first thing to greet him was a towering statue. A massive figure, standing at a daunting 500 meters. Its head touched the lowest layers of the sky. Ryuk stopped in his tracks, surprised. "I've seen this before." The statue was that of a faceless fallen, with 6 outstretched wings extending behind its back and both arms lifted skyward. It was the same image as the one Ryuk had seen when he was first teleported to Amamura. That faceless being who seemed to be holding all of Amorna on its shoulders. To have it positioned as the very first sight in the service center. Just what is its history? He wondered silently. "First time seeing it, newbie?" A teasing voice echoed near his ears. A figure strolled past him, flashing a knowing smile. It was a man, dressed in a wildly informal way. His golden shirt was half tucked into his equally golden trousers. The collar stood crookedly upward, unbuttoned at the top, revealing a bit of his chest. His arms were clasped behind his head, strolling like he owned the place, a confident smirk on his face. Must take some serious nerve to dress like that in a place where everyone's trying their best to look official, Ryuk mused, quietly admiring the man's carefree attitude before resuming his steps. The golden pathway ahead branched into multiple directions, each crisscrossing into different facilities. Various service workers moved in organized clusters, heading to their respective destinations. Not knowing exactly which building he was assigned to, Ryuk decided to approach the nearest one. Surprisingly, someone else was also heading toward the same structure. It was the overconfident man from earlier, already stepping through a revolving golden door. He quickened his pace, the glass door rotating just in time to let him in as well. The second he stepped inside, a loud voice boomed across the room. "Well, well, well. Look who's here." The tone was laced with a repressed anger that echoed around the lobby. Ryuk instinctively turned to the side, where he saw a man standing at the reception desk. The receptionist beside him had her head bowed in silence. From the way her legs shook mildly beneath the table, the sweat trickling down the back of her neck, and the way her fingers nervously clicked against each other, it was clear to Ryuk that this man was no ordinary person in the organization. "Hello, I am," he tried to introduce, walking towards the man, who interrupted him before he could finish. "I know who you are. You're Archguard Ryuk, the one whose name keeps flashing on my monitor as the only Archguard under my command who hasn't shown up for months, giving me the extra job of tapping the deduction button every single morning," the man said, clearly annoyed, as Ryuk scratched the back of his head. "It was due to an important reason," he defended, and the man shrugged. "Sure. Everyone's got that nowadays. Come with me. Let's assign you your service. One which you've been missing for months. Fat, short, irritable, loud." Each of these attributes was unique in its own way, but when you bring them all together in one person, things get quite troublesome. These were the 4 words Ryuk had in his mind as he looked at the man he was walking behind. He was fat, with a loud, protruding belly that his official-looking suit couldn't hide. And he was short too, about 1.7 meters in height. That height was acceptable and might even be considered tall back in Endearth, but here in Amamura, where nearly every random stranger stood at 2 meters or above, it fell into the short category. But that wasn't the worst part about him. The worst part was the way every Amamoran service worker who passed by either bowed so deeply their heads nearly kissed the ground, or got screamed at and verbally abused in one sarcastic way or another. And his loud voice didn't help matters. Damn workers. Always need me to do everything. What are they, children? He complained in a huff as they arrived before a door. Here, hold this, he commanded, tossing a couple of books toward Ryuk. Ryuk caught them before they hit the floor, a new observation flashing through his head. And he has a bad throw too. Anyone else would have missed the catch, and probably gotten yelled at all over again. TSK. What's wrong with the damn key? Trying to... Oh, it's unlocked, the man grunted, finally turning the key and opening the door. Ryuk found it surprising. A keyed door felt too primitive. None of the doors he'd passed so far even had keyholes, except this one. He was pulled out of the thought when the man fully opened the door and stepped in. Come in, he said, and Ryuk followed, entering a stuffy golden office. Drop the books over there on the table, then take your seat, the man ordered in a tone like he owned him. But Ryuk could already tell. This man was likely one of those Fallens who had gotten so used to their position that they acted like nobles. Ryuk didn't waste time making it clear he wasn't a slave. He walked toward the side table, but when he reached it, it was already piled high with books. It seemed like even adding one more book was all that was needed for the entire stack to come crashing down. So instead, Ryuk calmly set the books in his hand to his left, straightened up, and quickly rearranged the pile to make enough space. All of this was silently observed by the officer, Reese, whose previously irritated expression faded into one of quiet contemplation. He's obedient and accepts orders without complaint, doesn't let my irritability get to him. He'll be perfect for her, Reese thought to himself as Ryuk finished organizing the books. Now, with more than enough space, Ryuk placed the new ones gently on top before turning to the man, who was typing rapidly at his keyboard and quietly took the seat opposite him. The moment he did, the man spoke. You're late to your resumption by a month and 2 weeks. A total of 44 days. 100 points were deducted for each day of your absence. That means 4,400 points in total, he said flatly. You only had 700 Amamoran points in your card. That puts you at negative 3,700 now. Ryuk didn't know whether to feel stung or confused. He had no idea how the point system even worked yet. Life as an archguard is simple, Ryuk, the man said, finally swerving away from his monitor and locking eyes with him. There's only one thing that matters most, your Amamoran points. The average archguard starts with 1,000. If your points reach major milestones, say 100,000, you qualify for promotion to the next tier after Archguard, the Archdominion. And how do you earn points? By taking on what we call loyalty quests, he explained. Ryuk nodded, listening closely. Each of these quests comes with pay, but more importantly, Amamoran points. Complete them well and your points rise, and so does the weight of your pocket. But fail them? Your points drop fast. So choose only the quests you're confident you won't screw up. I understand, Ryuk replied. Good. And here, the man said, passing Ryuk a card with a barcode. Just scan that with your device. You'll gain access to the inner layer comms of the Archguards. You'll be able to view loyalty quest information, connect with other Archguards who are open to forming crews, and other helpful stuff. Ryuk began looking around for a scanning light app on his device, but the man raised his hand, stopping him. Do that when you get home. For now, I'm going to brief you on the loyalty quest you'll be handling as your first task. Ryuk paused. But I thought we were allowed to pick our own quests? He voiced out. At least it made sense since he was being given the comms, which should allow him to pick loyalty quests. You only get to choose for yourself if you pass the first test given to you by your representative officer, which is me. If you fail this one, your remaining Amamoran points will be deducted, and you'll have to retake the test, he said sternly. But yours is at the negative anyway. Might as well just be helping yourself. Ryuk nodded again, understanding the situation. How old are you again? The man asked suddenly. I'm 18 now, Ryuk replied. Perfect. he said, tapping away at the keyboard for a couple of minutes before speaking again. Found it. Hey, pass me your card. Ryuk handed over his Amemoran card. The man slotted it into a reader on the side. A beep confirmed it. He handed the card back to Ryuk, and immediately, a new card was dispensed from a slot beside the desk. This is your access pass to the Eiffel Royal Angelic Family, he said, passing it to him. The Eiffel Royal Family? Ryuk asked, raising a brow. Yes, that's the location of your first loyalty test. Your assignment, he paused, smirking slightly, is to serve as personal guard to the spoiled but powerful Princess Leaf Eiffel. Ha! Ryuk blinked. Who's it? A voice echoed from the other side of the door. Hello, Sir Leopold Blackwood. It is I, Anne. Oh, Anne? Give me a second. What followed were the sounds of shuffling and coat ruffling before the knob finally twisted and the door opened. Out stepped a tall, masculine angel. He wore a dark vest over a sharp, equally dark shirt and straight-legged trousers, also dark in color. Draped over his shoulders was a half-worn coat, and atop his head sat a stiff top hat. In his gloved right hand he held a sleek black cane. His golden eyes swept over the two figures standing before the door. One of them he recognized instantly, and a maid of the family. The other was a young white-haired man, unfamiliar, bearing bizarre purple tattoos that trailed from the side of his neck down beneath the collar of his otherwise ordinary white shirt. And he acknowledged her arrival. Good morning, sir. I've come to inform you of the arrival of the requested Amemoran Archguard. He asked to see you, sir, and said with her head bowed, avoiding direct eye contact with the butler. Oh, thank you, and Leopold replied. I'll take my leave now, sir, she said, turning and walking off down the hall. That left Leopold alone with the young man before him. Leopold Blackwood. The man introduced himself, tipping his hat slightly in greetings. Ryuk Null from the Amemoran Service Archguards. I'm here on behalf of the personal guard request made by the House of Eiffel, Ryuk replied, getting straight to the point. He produced his quest card, given to him by Officer Reese, which he handed to Sir Leopold. You're the right one, and you've come to the right place, Leopold said, examining the card briefly. Before you meet the princess, there will be necessary clothing adjustments and a set of rules to observe. I hope you don't mind, he added, subtly glancing at Ryuk's overly casual attire. While I did request someone younger to serve as her lady's right hand, I didn't expect them to send someone this young. Is he really an archguard at such an age? He doesn't seem to have much experience at all. The butler thought, studying Ryuk carefully. Doubt was all that filled his mind. I've been informed about that already, Ryuk answered, sensing the unspoken concerns. Very well. Then please come in, Leopold said, opening the door wider. Ryuk stepped inside, and the door shut quietly behind them. Elsewhere, the Pegasus carriage is ready, Princess Eiffel. A maiden's voice called softly inside a radiant golden room. Two women could be seen within. One, a beautiful angelic lady in her early 20s, stood respectfully at the side with her arms held neatly together. Beside her, cross-legged on a grand golden sofa, was a strikingly pretty girl dressed in shimmering royal attire. Princess Eiffel wore a floor-length gown spun from golden silk, embroidered with delicate threads of platinum and pearls. The bodice was sun-shaped, accentuating her slender form. Around her waist, a wide corset, boned and reinforced beneath the silk, hugged her tightly, while golden chains draped from its edges, each link engraved with royal insignias. Behind her, trailing across the couch, was a translucent cape, designed with frosted golden stars. Her long gloves were crafted from pale golden mesh, and her flowing golden hair was styled into a flawless crown braid, pinned in place with a diadem of pearls and sun silver. Not a single part of her attire was mismatched or unrefined. Everything about it was balanced and exact. But her face was the opposite. Her lips were curled slightly in irritation, her golden irises staring blankly out the window at the distant grasslands. Everything today annoyed Eiffel. She was being forced to attend an event that was not only unnecessary in her eyes but also said to be dangerous. To add salt to injury, her favorite singer was performing today, and she would be missing it, trapped in this suffocating gown, stripped of all her communication devices in the name of tradition. She hated every passing second. And she already hated the thought of the so-called archguard who would shadow her all day like a loyal mutt. The idea of some old stiff man trailing her in the name of duty made her stomach churn. Even though the butler had promised she would be assigned someone young, she remained skeptical. "Tell me, Ariand, is the 7 royal families meeting really that important?" she asked. "It is, Princess Eiffel," the maid responded softly. "It is your official introduction to the rest of the royal bloodlines. They are your future allies, leaders you'll work alongside to manage the Ivane territory under the Eiffel royal house." "I've heard that 1,000,000 times from father," she sighed tiredly. Ariand moved to help her up, but Eiffel shook her off and rose to her feet on her own. "Let's leave already. Hopefully, whoever this archguard is arrives late, and we get to leave without him," she muttered beneath her breath. The 2 women exited the hall, approaching the golden gate at the far end of the corridor. When they reached it, 2 guards pushed it open, revealing a regal outdoor scene. There, standing on the short glassy plain, stood a large golden carriage, adorned with the royal insignia of a flying horse with 6 wings and a horn rising from its forehead. The carriage was drawn by 4 majestic white creatures, resembling horses but far larger, each one possessing 2 grand wings. They were the rare mythical Pegasus, and standing beside them were 3 individuals. 2 of them Eiffel recognized immediately. One was the family's most trusted rider, Mr. Percival de Raymond, who drove her to every boring occasion she hated. The other, none other than the ever-nagging butler, Sir Leopold Blackwood, with his sugar-coated commands she could never seem to defy. These 2 men were engaged in conversation with a third figure, his back turned to her, but his hands held the Pegasus who rubbed against him, amidst exciting neighing sounds. Curious, Eiffel found herself leaning forward slightly, trying to get a glimpse of his face. As if sensing her presence, all 3 turned in unison, and in that very instant her eyes locked with his. For a brief moment, time seemed to hold its breath. Her breath caught in her throat as the irritation melted from her features, replaced by a flicker of genuine surprise. He wasn't walking, nor was he moving. Just the motion of his hands, rubbing gently against the necks of the Pegasus, who didn't seem to want to part from him. On his lips was a smile, so genuine, so pure, that Eiffel felt the irritation across her own lips burn away, parting slightly in surprise. Her world was a place of courteous bows and polite smiles. As the only princess and heir to the throne of the Eiffel royal family, she had seen no one ever face her with displeasure. But that also meant most of those smiles were fake, born out of formality, not happiness. But she could tell his was different. And it wasn't only the smile that captivated her. His attire was incredibly striking. A color she adored, white, that shimmered like snow beneath starlight. His figure was cut sharp, every line of the coat shaped to perfection, including the embedded silver chains. A vivid sapphire sash was lashed across his chest, a color of blue that clashed sharply with the white, yet somehow only added to the graceful aura of the clothing. He wore gloves, pristine as snow, the same color as his waistcoat, along with tapered trousers tucked into black boots. And on his head was an equally pristine white hat, tilted back slightly, seemingly pushed that way by the overly fond Pegasus. This was the attire Ryuk had to change into to accompany the princess, as he had been told by Officer Reese, and had been properly dressed by Sir Leopold himself. He had eventually come to know the man as a skeptical individual, but that hadn't stopped him from dressing Ryuk as if he, too, were an affiliate of the royal house. His presence stood out the most among the 3 men around the carriage. And the second, they all turned to face her. His calm, shimmering purple eyes locked with her striking golden ones, making her heart thump faster and faster. Princess Eiffel. The one to snap her out of it was none other than the family coachman, Percival, who took off his hat in a bow, followed by the butler. Their presence alone was enough to bring her out of her daze, but resuming her usual irritated expression was impossible in that moment. To their greetings, she elegantly raised her hand. The motion caught both men by surprise. Princess Eiffel was known as the spoiled royal child, and everyone knew how much she tried to avoid tradition. To raise a hand back like true royalty took them more than a little by surprise, especially since her usual reply was scoffing in annoyance. Sir Leopold didn't think too much of it, instead turning to Ryuk and ushering him forward. Princess Eiffel, meet Mr. Ryuk, an Amemoran archguard who will be accompanying you on the journey to the royal meeting, he introduced. Ryuk stepped forward until he was a meter away from the princess. He lifted his cap to his chest and gave a bow, just as Sir Leopold had taught him on their way here. But his bow was neither too deep nor too shallow. It is my honor to accompany you to and from the event, Princess Eiffel. His voice, so crisp and clear, rang out in an unending echo to Princess Eiffel, who found herself pausing in surprise at the sight of his elegance. The honor is mine, she said. Coachman Percival quickly stepped forward, appearing beside the golden carriage as he pulled open the door with a bow. Eiffel, finally finding her reason to turn away, disappeared into the carriage. I leave her in your care, Mr. Ryuk, Sir Leopold said, his voice low and serious. I trust you'll help uphold the Eiffel royal family's dignity and safety. If I fail this mission, I risk losing my title as Archguard. This is my first assignment. You can rest assured, I won't allow it to end without a fight. Then, leaning closer, he added in a whisper only Sir Leopold could hear. Besides, there's an invisible carriage just 200 meters from here, ready to act as a secret escort for the princess? Isn't there? That should reassure you, if the name of the Amemoran Service Center doesn't. Then he strengthened and turned to Coachman Percival, who held the carriage open for him, and gave a nod of appreciation as he stepped into it. Coachman Percival gently shut the door before resuming his walk to his seat at the front, but paused when he noticed Sir Leopold still standing there, like a man who had just seen a ghost. He saw the secret escort. The thought echoed in Sir Leopold's mind. Of course, they wouldn't leave the life and death of their one and only heir in the hands of a boy who barely looked a day over 20. The family had already prepared its secret guards to follow the princess's carriage once it departed, carefully hidden in a separate carriage cloaked with invisibility and drawn by specially bred Pegasi with concealment abilities. But who would have guessed the unassuming boy, who seemed to have no idea of the large background behind this task, already knew everything? Just how had he done that? Genius sensory ability, perhaps. But the security concealment is at the elite level. Sir Leopold? Coachman Percival called, managing to shake him from his thoughts. Drive the carriage, Coach Percival, not like your wife is on her labor, but like you're driving the queen herself, Sir Leopold said, naturally slipping back into his butler mode. Coachman Percival smiled. Rest assured, Sir Leopold. He walked past and hopped onto the coach. A signaling nod from Sir Leopold, and then, the reins cracked in the air, and following that, the Pegasi moved, neighing as they lifted into the air. Their pace quickened, faster and faster, until they became a beam of light that tore through the clouds, disappearing from the territory in a blink. 30 seconds after the carriage disappeared from view, Miss Ariande, the maid, was dismissed from the courtyard, and 30 seconds after, the space behind Sir Leopold rippled, and a man cloaked in black appeared beside him. We're ready to leave now, the man said. Sir Leopold nodded slowly. Very well, he said. Also, make sure to keep an eye on that archguard. He narrowed his golden eyes. I have a feeling he's far more dangerous than he appears to be. While the whistling of the breeze, the reins cracking, and the neighing of Pegasi filled the air outside the carriage, inside, things were much quieter and more stable. A sign of the special effects the carriage seemed to be imbued with. There were 2 long seats present within, each opposite the other. Close to the entrance sat Princess Eiffel, her gloved hands folded into each other as she stared out the window from the side. But occasionally, her gaze could not help but drift to the far end, where he was seated. He sat erect on the seat, legs crossed over each other, with his fingers curled together silently and resting on his knees. His shimmering purple eyes, just like hers, also looked out of the window. Right now, Ryuk's senses had been flared out to the max. It wasn't like possessing the Sky Vein lattice skill where he could feel all life 300 meters around him, but just his ears and nose, tuned to their max, picking up sounds as far as 1,000 meters away more than clearly, and a vivid image of the surroundings, including those he could not see, being formed in his head. Even the secret carriage that was moving behind them, seemingly tagging along, didn't escape Ryuk's ears. A faint smile curved his face. Their concealment is really good. The air is barely rippling even though they're traveling at the same speed as our carriage. But still, they can't stop the mild reverberation of the space. Having his senses gripping onto every corner of the environment made him feel at ease, as he knew he could remain in position to assess things carefully. And so, he turned his face away from the window, his gaze faintly brushing the area where she sat. He caught her just as she quickly averted her eyes. So this is the so-called spoiled but powerful Princess Eiffel? Ryuk recalled Officer Reese's description of her. According to what he had been told, the princess was supposed to be attending an important event, and Ryuk's mission was to accompany her. As for why the family didn't just choose one of their hundreds of guards to accompany her, that was a reason Officer Reese didn't think Ryuk needed to know. But Ryuk had to admit, the princess's mannerisms didn't match the tales he'd been told. She seemed to finally regain her nerves as she turned to look at him. The sound of her fingers fumbling and twisting to squeeze the edge of her skirt didn't escape his ears. Eiffel wanted to initiate a chat, but only she knew just how much she sucked at doing that. She was already used to a life where everyone spoke first, trying to make an impression on her. But in this situation, the silence was creeping, and for the first time, she felt it needed to be broken, to lighten the tension and dull the loud pounding of her heart. In the end, she could only follow up with what little she knew of him. "So, you work as an archguard from the Amamoran Service Center?" she asked, her voice a bit shaky, the clearest expression of her nervousness. Did he notice that? Was that too uncouth for a princess? He must think I'm dumb for asking such an obvious question. Does he now hate me? The thoughts rushed uncontrollably through her mind, each moment causing her to grip the hem of her skirt tighter. "That's correct, princess." The crisp and clear voice rang out once more, causing the negative thoughts to come to an instant stop. "I am an archguard and affiliated with the Amamoran Service Center," he added. The calm and small smile was all she needed to know. He probably appreciated the questioning, rather than thinking she was dumb for it. The reply made her stuffed chest lighten a bit, a sense of ease crawling upon her and giving her the energy to say what she truly felt about him. "You seem very young to be one from the Amamoran Center." Wait, did I just call him naive? The thought quickly echoed as she tried to correct herself. "I mean, in a good way, of course. I'm not saying it's bad or anything," she quickly added, resulting in his smile widening. "You seem to have noticed something obvious about those from the center," he said, and she nodded. "Yes, many of those from the center, at least those I've met, are old. My father would argue that they're not old, but experienced. But I don't believe in that." "Then it only makes sense you're a bit surprised to see one as young as me, doesn't it?" he asked, to which she paused in surprise. He understood so clearly, and then she nodded. "Yes, I am." "Your father is correct," he suddenly said, drawing her attention. Somehow, that phrase was something she was always told by almost everyone, especially that annoying butler, Sir Leopold, and hearing it from him triggered her irritation again. "How so?" she forced out from between her teeth. "Because those who are old, of course," he said, pausing her irritation in its tracks. "But there's a high chance their old age also translates to experience. Like me being so young also, unfortunately, means this is my first ever mission as an archguard," he added, drawing a bit of surprise from her. His words repeated in her head, and eventually, she came to agree with them. Old was old. That was always her thought, and why she disagreed with her father, who said old wasn't old, but experienced. It was like seeing white and someone else calling it black, something she disliked. But now, someone was offering a technically correct explanation. He was young, and it matched the fact that this was his first mission, meaning he was inexperienced. It was a perfect viewpoint, one that validated why her father could be right, while still agreeing with her belief that old is old, and need not be sugar-coated. The explanation made Princess Eiffel's irritation fade away just as subtly as it came, and a giggle escaped her lips as she said, "Are you admitting you're inexperienced, Mr. Ryuk?" Her words seemed to catch him by surprise. This she noticed, seeing his sudden pause, but it only made her giggle. For a time, he had seemed so mature, even while appearing so young. But then, his little slip-up made him feel less like those oldies who never seemed to be wrong or ever make a mistake. It was a quality that Eiffel found even more attractive about him. "I'm sorry if that may have made you worried, Princess Eiffel," he said, but she waved it off. "It didn't, not at all. At least it feels good to know this is your first time, rather than being pretentious like one of those oldies," she said, to which he smiled. "It's a surprise. Most would be deeply unsettled to be watched over by someone seemingly incapable," he replied. She nodded but explained, "I'm not afraid because while Sir Leopold might be hatefully nagging sometimes, he is a very protective and capable butler. I wouldn't be surprised if he's sitting on top of the carriage, secretly tagging along, just to make sure I'm protected and safe. He organized this, so if he chose you, then I'm confident he must be very sure, even if this is your first mission," she said, and he gave a small nod of understanding. "She's right," Ryuk thought. "Except that Sir Leopold's confidence isn't in me, but in the invisible protection tagging along with us. He knew he was just the figure presented to the world, a backstory character who only seemed like Eiffel's sole security. The true power was behind them, various hidden waves and senses constantly roaming around, even within the room, silently observing both his and the princess's actions. It didn't take long after that when Ryuk's hearing picked up the sounds of neighing and roaring from various bestial creatures. The sounds of shoes clicking against what seemed to be a gem-encrusted floor also came through, and soon enough, he painted in his mind a large structure whose outside, lined with neatly parked carriages. "It seems like we're here, Princess," he said as Eiffel let out a small exhale. Large gatherings like this, she did not like. Heck, she never even wanted to be here in the first place, and her irritation had only dulled due to his presence. But now, she was about to step into a place she detested. She was pulled from her thoughts when she felt a light breeze whistle through the air. She raised her gaze, surprised to find Ryuk now sitting before her, closer to the entrance. He had moved without her noticing a single thing. She didn't react outwardly to that, but her heartbeats grew louder upon the realization. He's so close. The sound of the Pegasus neighing, along with a subtle shift in the air current, revealed to Ryuk that they were now flying downward from the sky. Soon enough, they landed, and the carriage door was opened. A hand stretched out from the side, one that belonged to Coachman Percival, who reached out to take the princess's hand and help her down from the carriage. It was a gesture considered acceptable for a coachman, but this time his hand was raised in vain. The hand he took was larger and firmer than the princess's, and his head raised in surprise, only to be faced with Ryuk's mocking smirk. Instantly, Coachman Percival yanked his hand back, but it was already too late. He had helped Ryuk down to the ground. Then, he watched with eyes turning red and jealousy in his heart as Ryuk stretched out his hand to the princess, who accepted it and was elegantly helped down from the carriage. That was supposed to be my job," he screamed in his head. But his expression quickly turned into a soft smile when the princess got down, her eyes softly grazing past him. He bowed as she walked past, though not without shooting a hateful glare at Ryuk, who simply grinned back with mockery. That was my chance to finally hold the princess's soft hand after all these years. TCH. That bastard! Percival cursed under his breath. Ryuk's gaze had already shifted to their surroundings, calmly taking in the sights. They now stood before what appeared to be a golden castle, and all around them was its outer court, a grand area where numerous carriages were parked and refined-looking angels stepped out one by one. He had thought the carriage belonging to the Eiffel royal family was the largest he'd ever seen. But looking around now, he realized theirs was more of a mid-sized design. There were even gigantic carriages in the back, pulled along by shockingly powerful ancestral-level beasts. Among those extra-large carriages, Ryuk counted about 3. And stepping out of each one was a young angelic lady or young man, each followed by another figure, a personal guard just like Ryuk himself. "Those are the heirs of the other royal houses," Princess Eiffel said to him, as if she had read his thoughts. The various heirs alighted, and a few gazes turned toward their position. Most of those gazes paused longer than expected, something Eiffel didn't understand but quickly came to realize. They weren't looking at her. They paused more on Ryuk. He was strikingly handsome in his simple Victorian dress, and she wasn't the only one who noticed it. "He is too striking, and looks more refined than I am. Am I that ugly looking? Maybe I'm not worthy to stand beside him. Or, maybe it would be better to create some distance from him." Her usual negative emotions quickly took the chance to creep in, and her gaze slowly drifted to her feet. But halfway through, she heard his crisp, confident voice. "If I may, Princess?" She turned her head and found him extending his arm. A pink blush rose to her cheeks, but she didn't deny him. She took it, and together they resumed walking arms in arm toward the entrance alongside the other heirs and nobles. And now, she could feel the attention shift instantly back to her, especially from the girls. Many of them looked at her with gazes that seemed jealous. Somehow, just somehow, Eiffel was starting to enjoy coming to this event. The inside of the building was divided into 2 floors. The base floor, where the majority of nobles were seated, was a beautiful, wide, golden hall, with various round tables of 3 arranged throughout. On the walls hung several paintings, each depicting what seemed to be a different race of angels. Different races, Ryuk thought, because the dressing of each of these angels was significantly distinct from the others. But it wasn't just the paintings, it was the reality around him. While he was dressed in Victorian-era fashion to fit in with the Eiffel royal house, other royal houses wore entirely different styles. There was one royal family dressed in kimonos. 2 of them. The main royal, a female wearing an orange-colored full-length dress that hugged closely around her form, and the other, her guard, wore a samurai hakama with a long katana strapped to his waist, its edge just an inch from scraping the ground. Ryuk didn't know the name of their royal house, but they were depicted in one of the paintings around him. Another group belonged to a royal house dressed in overly inflated robes, with large woven turbans around their heads. Another wore the white furry skin of a snow bear, with the wide-open mouth of the beast worn directly above their heads. The royal from this house was a burly young man with a scar crossing over his left eye. He emitted a wild, beastly aura, as if he were a creature of the wild himself. But Ryuk knew better. The final group consisted of just 2 people. One was a female who wore a dark robe that covered all of her features, including a dark hood that concealed even the back of her neck. The front of her face was masked as the cloth continued upward, covering the lower half of her face, leaving only her piercing golden eyes exposed. Judging from the different dresses they wore, Ryuk could come to a simple truth. There are a total of 5 royal houses in here. But as he walked through the hall and looked at the painted images above, he couldn't help but notice. They weren't just 5. He counted a total of 12, yet only 5 houses were present in the room. What happened to the rest? He silently thought, but eventually shrugged it off. He remained on the lower floor, standing beneath one of the images and looking up at it. The one he had come in with, Princess Eiffel, had been led to a different place than all the rest. That place was none other than the upper floor above them. It hung directly above their heads by golden chains, and up there were the remaining 4 royal house heirs. Those who had accompanied each heir weren't allowed up. All of them, including other nobles not part of the royal families, remained below. Up there, only the 5 royal heirs were allowed. But the golden castle itself seemed to have its guards who watched the heirs to prevent any infighting. Still, Ryuk's attention covered everywhere, even though he couldn't exactly hear what the group above was saying, due to a strange barrier around them that distorted sound from them. He could only hear a few fragments of gibberish. Perhaps if I touched the barrier up above, I could adapt to its energy and hear what they're saying. But jumping so high would be too eye-catching. That seemingly small observation made Ryuk realize the first limit of his power. And that was, he needed to touch the source of energy to adapt to it. Without touching the barrier, his senses could never truly press through it. If he were trapped, he'd need to touch the source before he could adapt to it and then escape. If someone could prevent him from reaching the source of energy, they could succeed in trapping him in one place. The discovery of this weakness didn't leave Ryuk frantic. It made him smile when he realized it. A weakness about himself wasn't something he could easily put into words before, but now he could. It was a different sensation that made him feel like he understood himself even more. Still, faint murmurs continued on the lower deck. Some of the nobles tried to mingle with those who had arrived alongside the royals, gathering themselves in small groups around the round tables. Some maiden servants served them drinks, mostly, but all of this wasn't what he cared about. He wasn't used to the royal way of speaking among themselves, being the brush boy he once was. Nor did he see the sense in joining them or speaking of topics he likely had no clue about, or of associations that wouldn't necessarily help him achieve what he was here to do and could even distract him. So he simply stood alone, walking from one picture to the next, then to the next, immersing in how distinct each family's dress style was, and trying to see a difference that was more than their unique dress. He couldn't find one. Quickly, hours passed, and soon enough, the royals above began stepping down one by one. This time, the hardened expressions they wore upon entering the hall seemed to have melted slightly, and some of them even smiled and discussed with each other. Seems like it went well, Ryuk thought to himself. Soon after, he rejoined with Princess Eiffel, who smiled brilliantly the moment she saw him. "Seems like you had a good time, Princess Eiffel," he said as she took his arm. "It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be," she whispered, to which he simply smiled. The other royal heirs had also decided to leave after the meeting, and they resumed walking out. "Welcome back, Princess Eiffel," Coachman Percival greeted as he opened the carriage door. And just a couple of seconds later, their carriage rose high into the air, returning to the royal castle. "Seems like an easy loyalty quest," Ryuk thought to himself, as he sat down with a fulfilled heart. But soon enough, just as his eyes, wanting to close in relaxation, began to lower, they opened sharply, a gleam of light crisscrossing within them. "Just when I thought it's over." One moment he was sitting in the carriage, preparing to close his eyes, and in the next, he could feel the air rippling as metal clashed violently. The hidden security that had tagged along with them seemed to be exchanging moves, either with intruders or amongst themselves, but the latter didn't make sense. But Ryuk didn't react. He simply listened, and with sound alone, the image formed vividly in his mind. The clashes came faster and faster, weapons slashing in quick bursts, 5 strikes in an instant, revealing to him that the number of intruders was probably 5, at least. Threats were being shouted by the security guards, calling out the names of their royal houses to warn the attackers. Yet the enemies remained silent, delivering swift, brutal attacks without a single word. And then, the sound of a sharp blade piercing through skin rang out, followed by a mournful shriek that was abruptly cut off by another slash. The thud of a body being tossed against something echoed in Ryuk's head, and he concluded, one of the guards had been killed. This he could guess from the sudden cut-off of the scream, and the enraged roar that followed. The roar of "Die!" grew louder, the collision of weapons growing frantic. But a mocking grin curled up Ryuk's lips. The once organized rhythm of weapon clashing now sounded erratic. He could hear some breathing turning ragged. A clear sign, one group had grown desperate. Their fighting was becoming disordered, and then, a second blade pierced. Another sharp scream and another body thrown through the air. It didn't stop. The sounds continued, blades stabbing one by one, bodies crashing down. The elimination only became swifter, and soon, the battle ended. Ryuk could already guess who survived as the sound of air being torn through rapidly in their direction echoed out to him. The guards were most likely all dead. So much for the main security guards. Coachman Percival's loud shout rang out as the carriage sped up, but whatever was chasing them was moving 3 times faster. Soon enough, it caught up. You bastards! You dare to make a move on the mighty Eiffel Royal House. If you do not turn back now, you will suffer a fate worse than death, the coachman yelled. Ryuk could only roll his eyes. Why is the first thing they yell always some dumb name, as if it can stop a blade? He thought. Even the security guards had yelled out the Eiffel Royal House's name when the assassins attacked, and they were all killed. Now this fool, too, was yelling instead of setting up a protective barrier or doing something useful. They're already on us, he noted, finally stirring from his seat, turning to Princess Eiffel. He could see her with her ears pressed against the door. She, too, could hear strange noises, though judging from her confused expression, not clearly. She felt his gaze and turned from the door, whispering, I'm hearing strange noises that sound like fighting. Then she saw his arms reach forward slightly. Ha! It looked like he was reaching toward her. But then, a force slammed into the carriage hard enough to throw her from her seat. A choked yelp escaped Eiffel's lips as the carriage tilted to the side, sending her tumbling. Yet just as she braced to crash into the wall, she found herself cradled in warm, strong arms. She opened her tightly shut eyes, a flicker of shock and surprise to find herself in his arms. Now, his earlier gesture made sense. Wait, did he predict the attack? She thought, stunned. But Ryuk didn't wait another second. A moment later, light collapsed around his palm. Eiffel watched as a dark grimoire appeared, its pages fluttering open to reveal a strange, bizarre drawing that somehow seemed incomplete. Instantly, Ryuk's eyes stilled, and a vortex of dark energy tore open inside the carriage. He stepped into it, and both of them vanished into the darkness. Just 3 seconds after Ryuk and Eiffel disappeared into the vortex, kaboom! A powerful wave of energy tore through the carriage, blasting it apart as if struck by an atomic bomb, followed by a mushroom cloud of warped space and crackling magic that erupted outwards into the surrounding space. The Pegasi screamed as they were sent flying into the ground, along with Coachman Percival, who had already been knocked unconscious from the explosion. Immediately, 3 figures cloaked in pitch black emerged from the storm of warped space, their crimson eyes, the only features visible, glinting as they scanned the swirling chaos. As the blast settled, "What? Where are they?" Their shocked voices rang out. There was no trace of their target. But then, all at once, they turned their gazes downward, and just 200 meters below them was their target. She was being held in a princess carry by a young man, a blue sash floating from his neck, along with a dark grimoire floating above his head as he stared up at them. I was planning to hide away in the clouds, and somehow I got teleported right below them, Ryuk thought, a wry smile on his lips, although his expression remained cold and focused. There are 3 of them, 2 at the early Apocrypha stage, and the last at the peak of the Eternity stage. A group like this, just to assassinate a girl only at the initial Cataclysm stage? Seems like they came prepared. I think 2 of them already died. Earlier, he counted the clash of 5 intruders. Now only 3 stood. So, it was safe to say the hidden security team had dragged 2 of them down with them before they died. But Ryuk wasn't given time to think further. One of the assassins suddenly flung out a row of dark rectangular playing cards from his palm. Each card shot out, not directly at Ryuk, but in the space around him, and soon they shifted their position, coming to surround him in a circular format. Bizarre murmurings filled the air, seemingly whispered by the cards themselves, as pitch-black threads of light extended from each one, quickly converging. In an instant, they coalesced, forming a dark, spherical barrier that enveloped them completely, plunging everything into utter darkness. They had been trapped along with the assassins. System warning. Presence of dark god energy has been sensed. Accessing dark god type. Error. Energy concealed by advanced ritual technique or not real. The host is advised to exercise caution. Dark gods, huh? How mystifying, Ryuk muttered as he felt himself descending, falling deeper and deeper into a strange realm. A realm of darkness and of cards. 3 colossal cards, each nearly 1,000 meters tall, stood around him. One to his left, the other to his right, and the last one directly behind. Each bore a different, corrupted art, partially concealed by swirling dark energy and Ryuk himself. He was caught in the center of it all, endlessly descending into a pit of thick, suffocating black. The abyss of darkness rolled and coiled around him like smoke. Below, he sensed something blooming, an overwhelming aura of a nefarious entity. He couldn't see what lay beneath, not fully, but the faint shape of a putrid, wide maw lingered just below, giving the impression of a monstrous mouth opening wider, waiting to devour him. But he still had time, exactly 16 seconds. The grimoire appeared, hovering above him, and his will reached out, trying to activate Void Vortex. But even after 3 seconds, nothing responded. Even after he stretched his hands forward. The void has been locked down, he thought grimly. The realization dawned on him, its source unmistakably tied to one of the hanging cards, and his pupils narrowed in response. Then he looked at the one cradled in his arms. "Princess Eiffel?" he called softly. She slowly raised her gaze from where her face had been buried in his chest. Her expression was filled with pure fear. Even though she could see nothing, her world having turned pitch black, the horrifying aura suffocating them was more than enough. The only warmth, the only sanity she could feel, was whatever was holding her or which she held so tightly. "Is that you, Mr. Ryuk?" she asked shakily, her trembling fingers reaching to touch his neck. "She can't see?" Ryuk thought to himself. But he pushed the thought aside and answered, "Yes, it's me, Princess Eiffel, and right now, we're in quite the precarious situation." Her arms tightened around him. "I should never have come to this party. I told my father. I told Sir Leopold." She began murmuring like someone facing the abyss, and losing their mind to it. Her helplessness confirmed what Ryuk suspected. She was of little help in this realm. In that instant he gave a command. "Activate Beyonder Dragon." The second he uttered those words, the abyss came to a screeching halt, followed by the dark light around the cards freezing in place, and the rolling darkness slowing to a crawl. Then, 6 white-scaled fragments seemingly slipping out of the void emerged around Ryuk's head like a halo. Snowy white scales reappeared on his skin. He raised his right hand into the air, fingers outstretched, and then he clenched it into a fist. The shock wave from that single grasp of space unleashed a destructive wave of energy, rippling outward with unrestrained power. The realm shuddered, fabric of space cracking like fragile glass, spreading from above Ryuk in all directions. And then, boom! A second shockwave thundered out as the blast smashed against the 3 giant cards. Cracks tore across their surfaces as if they were made of brittle crystal, but they resisted being fully shattered. They remained suspended, pulsing, sending out more streams of dark energy that made the abyss roll even more. "Gul, Yut, Diero." Murmurs came ringing through the darkness around him, each word distracting him and sending fragmented memories and thoughts into his mind. Ryuk's folded hands dropped slowly from the air. He turned his gaze downward, then his arms jerked back, 3 afterimages appearing of him, each bringing him closer down the darkness, before he launched a powerful punch straight downward. When that punch slammed into the space beneath him, it seemed to carry the weight of an entire realm. The darkness trembled, and the space fractured completely. Ryuk watched with steeled eyes as a massive purple fist-shaped halo surged downward. It was his simple punch, further powered by his hurricane energy, and it crashed directly into the open maw below. The sickening sound of thick liquid rolling rang out, followed by a terrifying explosion, and a blood-curdling shriek that died as quickly as it rose. Whatever had been holding this bizarre realm together finally broke, and the second it did, the world cleared in an instant. Once more, sunlight pierced through, and he raised his head, finding himself still in the same place. An illusion? He wondered. But then he turned his gaze back to the assassins. The trio still hovered in the same position above him, just where they had been before the illusion. All of a sudden, dark blood burst out from beneath the cloak of one of them, and his hands shot up to his head. "Ah!" A soul-piercing scream rang out. Ryuk watched him fall from the sky, but before he could hit the ground, he faded into ashes. He, and even the clothes he wore, vanished, as if he had never existed at all. The two remaining assassins blinked as if just waking up, snapping their eyes toward Ryuk with looks of disbelief. For a second, they froze. Then they launched forward. A curved, sickle-like blade, rolling with dark energy, appeared in the hand of the first. His grip locked tight around it as both hands powered up. A devastatingly swift strike aimed straight for Ryuk's neck. In less than a second, it was just an inch away. But it met nothing. Ryuk bent his waist, allowing the sharp edge to graze barely an inch from the tip of his nose. Then he stepped to the side, fading from where he had stood, just as a long spear sliced clean through his afterimage, obliterating it. Both assassins paused in shock, turning around, only to find him now standing in the very spot where they had just left. "You have already lost," he said calmly. His hands extended toward them, 2 fingers pressed together. "Activate. Sovereign rewriting." Flick. It had always occurred to him just one thing. His ability to manipulate objects, to turn them into something else just because he could see deeper into the bonds that held them together, and how they were held. Altering just one bond in these objects was usually all it took to destabilize them, sending the whole thing crashing into something else. But now, with Sovereign rewriting at its max, Ryuk's view of it was different, and he had planned to test it on these 2 assassins before him. The second Sovereign rewriting was created, golden motes of light appeared around him, freckling the very fabric of reality within a radius of roughly 1,100 meters. The 2 assassins expected a blast of some sort the moment Ryuk flicked his fingers, and they instantly shot further back with speed. But no matter how fast they were, they couldn't escape the freckled golden zone in time. And in an instant, the greatest horror they had ever experienced occurred. It was sudden, almost instant, a sensation that could only be described as a sailor being caught in the jaws of a shark and reduced to nothing. That was exactly what happened. Their retreating momentum halted the moment they felt the space around them twist inward. A grin spread across Ryuk's lips as he watched the assassins violently implode with a bang. The Eternity Stage expert died immediately, his head being the first caught in the folding of space, and therefore giving in to total annihilation. The Apocrypha Stage assassin managed to save himself quickly, with only his lower body being severed in half. The second he escaped the crumbled space, a dark card appeared in his hands, which he instantly shattered into pieces. From the surrounding space, the head of a dark fox seemed to materialize, instantly opening its maw wide and trying to clamp down on him. It was as if the assassin had used a suicidal art, as he was no doubt going to be bitten by the fox head that he summoned. But one look and he could tell. He won't die like he made it look. He would only be teleported away instead. It's an escape art, he thought, something he could instantly narrow down from the void energy he sensed, and he reacted in an instant. The fox technique was attempting to consume him, and so Ryuk moved, appearing beside the expert like he had always been there, just as the dark fox tried to clamp down. Ryuk's leg pressed firmly against the space to anchor himself, but it shattered into fragments, unable to withstand his weight. Still, that brief moment of resistance was all he needed to drive his claw upward through the air with tremendous force. Instantly, a powerful force slammed into the void fox art, blasting it backward as it unraveled into nothing but fading motes of dark energy. The assassin, now nothing but an upper body, collapsed to the ground. His dark cloak had long been torn away by the folding of space, revealing the bizarre, otherworldly form of his true race beneath. When Ryuk looked at him, the first thing that came to mind was a dark elf. The man's ears were long like an elf's, but instead of elongating backward, they extended sideways. A dark scar lingered on his face, looking more like a tattoo, rippling with a strange dark energy that was neither void nor abyssal. It caught Ryuk's attention as he bent low to the man. He made a swift claw attack that instantly slashed toward his face, fast and deadly. But the sound of a palm clashing with another rang out as Ryuk's right hand moved, clasping the claw into his own, instantly bringing down all the force it contained. "I told you, you've already lost, didn't I?" he asked, watching as the assassin tried to exert strength against him, the claw inching closer to his face. The sound of bones splintering, followed by skin unraveling. A moment later, a hand was brutally torn off from its source, flying into the air amidst continuously oozing dark blood. The assassin writhed and struggled under the pain of losing his arm, his fate imminent. But Ryuk looked at him silently for a couple of seconds, before asking, "Now that I remember, hey system, even though I no longer have void energy, I haven't broken the pact I made to eventually become a Void Azura, right? What happened to the Void Azura Rift? Your Void Pact is still available under a section called Packs in the system interface. Would host like to check it out? Maybe later. Activate Void Azura Rift," he ordered, and in an instant, a rift appeared to the side, arresting the attention of the elf, whom Ryuk picked up by the neck. "I'll spare your life," he said, watching as the assassin's eyes widened in disbelief, just before he was thrown in, and the rift disappeared the moment he was gone. "For now," Ryuk finished, before glitching away from where he stood, reappearing beside the princess who lay on the ground. His white scales slowly faded off him, along with the shards that hovered around his forehead. He knelt beside the princess, and it was easy to see she was unharmed. Not even the hem of her skirt had been touched, which was a relief. But when he turned her face to him, he was surprised. Her golden eyes had turned pitch black, their focus lost, her lips opening and closing, muttering bizarre words he couldn't understand. What's gotten into her? The girl, due to being only at the initial cataclysm stage, yet trapped in an apocryphal-level dark god art, has lost her mind to its power. Even though she bore no injury from the illusion art, her mere existence within it was enough. Ryuk nodded. "So, she freaked out. That's a way to put it. Then it's easy to get her back on her feet," Ryuk said, rising. "Only with the help of a soulmancer or a powerful illusionist would that dark force be slowly exorcised from her mind. Both of which you're not. Maybe if you hadn't gotten rid of your Etherius energy, you could have done something." The system rubbed in, but Ryuk shrugged it off while focusing his gaze. If she freaked out from coming in contact with a powerful energy source, then all she needs is another powerful energy source that could re-freak her out of her current state. Ryuk muttered to himself, "Pretty sure that's not a thing. Activate King's aura." It was dark, pitch dark, rolling shadows that made it even darker, and she was drowning, sinking deeper and deeper into this roiling shadow. She tried to scream, but her lips were sealed by fear, for in this sinking darkness, she could almost feel its presence. Bizarre entities drifted in the dark, wallowing around her. They spoke as they wandered in the shadows, murmurs she couldn't understand, but whose existence reminded her this realm was cursed. And their rising loudness proved they were getting closer. If she uttered even a word, what could come next might be worse than death. Her mind was unraveling. Her thumping heart slowed into the acceptance of death, and of sinking into the abyss. But all of a sudden, through that devouring blackness, words echoed. "Activate King's aura." Everything instantly unraveled into chaos. The darkness that drowned her, the abyss that boiled around her, suddenly recoiled violently from a power that made even it shudder. The murmurs she had heard turned into pained roars as the entities scattered and disappeared far away. Something had come. Something possibly worse than the evil that let her go. She opened her eyes to the sight of a being that filled her not with horror, but with ultimate fear. A figure cloaked in flaming blue, floating down gently toward her sleeping form. But while he looked like just one man, when she looked behind him, a shudder radiated through her soul. There were eyes behind him, dozens, opening within his ever-expanding shadow. The sensation could only be described as walking into a dark cave, only for hidden bats to suddenly open their eyes in unison. Normally, one would feel chills to the bone, but then the bats would scatter and you'd shrug it off. But these were no bats. Each was a terrifying nightmare cloaked in beautiful color. And she knew it. Her body trembled even more as he descended closer. Her mind was breaking into bits as the horror of what was to come and the fear of what was already here enveloped her completely. And just before she wished for death to take her, he was already on her. He moved with calm and grace, and she watched as the blue flames covering him wrapped around her. The hands of the entity wound around her neck, gently pulling her into the warmth of the flames. Then the words came, crisp and clear. "You're with me, Elfie. You're safe. You're safe. 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 Safe." The words echoed through the cracked realm of her broken mind like a peaceful melody. But they didn't just stop the cracking. They mended it. Her rigid body eased along with the horror and fear, which faded like they had all been just a dream. And when she opened her eyes again, it was to the sight of the familiar golden sun and the fresh breeze blowing across her skin. But she wasn't alone. She felt his hug, the one who had become more than familiar, and her limp hands slowly moved, wrapping around him as she hugged him deeply. "I am safe," she spoke suddenly, and Ryuk allowed the hug to linger for a few more seconds before he pulled back and looked into her eyes. "Princess Elfie? Are you okay?" he asked, gazing into her clear, golden eyes. "I'm fine now, Mr. Ryuk," she said softly. And to that, she watched a relieved smile bloom on his lips. "That's good to hear. Let's return to the royal house," he said, turning to resume walking. But he hadn't taken more than 5 steps when he paused, glancing behind him. Princess Elfie had not moved. She stood exactly where she had been, both hands gripping the hem of her skirt, her face turned toward the ground. I can't walk." "Hey, system, did she get wounded in the legs?" Ryuk asked internally, but the notification came back quickly. "No, and they're not paralyzed either." "Then, why? Please, may I request that you carry me, Mr. Ryuk?" she asked hesitantly. "TSK, who does this little princess think she is? Asking you to carry her? Humph. Dream on, little girl." The system was the first to lash out at the idea, and even Ryuk's eyes flickered with a hint of protest. But then, a yelp escaped Elfie's lips as she was suddenly lifted off the ground into a princess carry. "Don't say it," Ryuk said firmly. Elfie stayed quiet, even though a sweet smile spread gently across her lips. Ryuk moved forward, covering meters in a single step, though not at his fastest speed, which could easily rip her skin open from wind pressure alone. When he came to a stop, they found themselves in the middle of a chaotic mess. A man and a group of winged horses were battling it out. That man was none other than Coachman Percival, who held the chains of the Pegasi that refused to obey him, seemingly trying to flee. He was frantically yelling commands, only causing the Pegasi to resist harder. But everything stopped when a figure appeared before the frontmost Pegasus. Ryuk, his hands slowly rising. "Hey! Get the princess out of there! Don't let her get trampled to death!" Coachman Percival shouted. But then his jaw dropped when the neighing Pegasi all suddenly went silent. He noticed Ryuk's hands were covered in a gentle blue flame, and ahead, each Pegasus lowered its head in submission. Silence descended on the grass. Elfie watched from his chest, her eyes wide with shock, as the Pegasi cooled under him. Ryuk reached out and rubbed the largest one on its neck. Their foreheads touched gently, and then he whispered, "Lead us home." Before her disbelieving eyes, the beast lowered itself to the ground. He climbed on top, placing her gently in front of him, and with no reins, the Pegasus lifted into the sky, soaring upward, disappearing into the clouds. Coachman Percival was so gobsmacked that the Pegasi were almost out of sight before he remembered. "Hey! Wait for me!" he shouted from below. But alas, in the end, Ryuk forced him to run all the way back to the royal house, where Sir Leopold was already waiting. The Pegasi descended onto the grass, and Sir Leopold was already before them the instant they landed. "Princess Elfie, are you okay?" was the first question he asked as Ryuk passed the princess in his arms to his. "I'm fine, Sir Leopold," Elfie said, irritation returning, mostly from having to go away from his warmth. But when Ryuk looked at Sir Leopold's face, he could see fear in the man's eyes as he scanned every inch of Elfie's outer body before he commanded. "Coachman Percival?" "Yes, Sir Leopold." "Lead Mr. Ryuk to the family's guest room." "I'll be with you soon, Mr. Ryuk," he said, and an instant later he was gone, rushing back into the royal house with Elfie in his arms. Why does he seem like he would die all of a sudden? Ryuk couldn't help but mutter under his breath. Footsteps drew closer behind him. It was none other than Coachman Percival. He watched as the coachman glanced in Sir Leopold's direction before turning to him with a low voice. "That's because he probably would die if any harm came to Elfie. While the princess might seem spoiled and lucky to be born royalty, her family, there's something else. Living angelic monsters. She's the odd one out, because she was born last. If harm came to her, Sir Leopold, you and even me, we'd all be dead," he said. But Ryuk shrugged it off and kept walking. If her family was a group of monsters, then the assassins not only would have never come in the first place, but would have backed off on the mere mention of their name, but they didn't. So much for a family of monsters. "Hey, where are you going?" he asked, but got no reply from Ryuk, who continued his walk. "I'm supposed to be leading you to the guest house," Percival shouted behind him as he finally stopped, pausing to give him a look. "Isn't the guest house in my direction?" Ryuk asked, and it was Percival's turn to pause. He wanted so badly to refute the young man, but unfortunately he was right. "Tch, that cocky bastard. I can't wait for him to be done with this mission and be chased away." But as much as Coachman Percival hated the cocky boy, deep in his heart, he was thankful. He knew well it was only due to his presence that they had survived. He had been knocked out in the first strike, crashing onto the ground, but before he fell unconscious, he had been able to feel that aura. He counted 2 Apocrypha stage beings and 1 Eternity stage being. While they weren't exactly after him, and had ignored him like a plague not worth killing, they would have killed the princess. And if they had, he would have died in the hands of her family. He was alive right now only because the princess was safe, and that was due to this cocky man's presence. That he was at least grateful for. The sound of tapping echoed through the golden room, its source from none other than a young man who sat on a bench at the side, fingers tapping against the armrest. Tapping on the seat had now become Ryuk's second nature, because his very sensitive hearing came with a disadvantage, which was forming various images in his head based on what he could draw from his surroundings. The more silent he was, the clearer he listened, the more vivid the image, making his thoughts trail away. But with him tapping his fingers close to him and loudly enough, his hearing would focus on that, anchoring him back to himself and drowning out the other noise and images in his head. But soon enough, he could hear the sound of steps as he sat upright, turning to look at the entrance. The knob twisted and in came Sir Leopold, who held his coat in his arms. When he reached, he took off his hat and gave a bow that was low enough to surprise Ryuk himself. "I've heard everything from the lips of Percival. I could imagine worse would have happened without your presence, and hope to be forgiven for my initial acts of negligence towards you," he said, his voice low, like that of a man who had brutally rid himself of pride. Ryuk took off his hat before responding. "I'm only doing my job, Sir Leopold," he said, leading to the man rising as his hardened exterior finally broke into a small smile. "And you did it well, Mr. Ryuk. I've marked your mission as successful and written a review, along with doubling your initial pay for the mission," he said, to which Ryuk's eyebrows gleamed. The mission he had accepted to take on, only because the amount of Amoran points they were paying for something so easy was ridiculous, and that was due to the princess being who he was to guard. Even the pay itself was already good enough, 200,000 Amma notes. And now it would be doubled. "Thank you. Since you have marked my mission complete, I will take my leave now," he said, to which the man nodded his head. "Very well. I'll accompany you to the entrance, Mr. Ryuk." Finally got rid of my negative point value, Ryuk muttered to himself as he sat on the back of an Ammonius. In his hands was a golden card, and on it was the count. Ammamorn points, 1,300/100,000. He previously had a negative of 3,700 points. But after completing the mission, which rewarded 5,000 points, he had cleared his debt and was now in the positive. A small beam of golden light emitted from his pupils, and 3 golden panels appeared. One of them was the panel for the Archguard comms, and the other stated his mission complete, the review he got, which was a 10-star rating out of a 1,000-star scale, and the last was the blinking reward of his mission. 500,000 Ammamorn points rewarded. His initial reward was just 200,000, but Sir Leopold had added an extra 300,000. It made Ryuk smile a bit. When he looked at the amount of money that was present in the joint bank account created by Mrs. Linnea, he saw 5,000 Amma notes. It wasn't much, but he had eventually come to learn that it was enough for the average Fallen to live on for a week at least. They had all just come to this world, and they didn't have much at all, although Mrs. Linnea never made him feel like that. For that reason, Ryuk made his choice. He transferred 300,000 Ammamorn points to the joint bank account, leaving 200,000 in his Archguard account. Life should be a bit easier with this. But still, Ryuk muttered as he dispersed the comms. What is more important is this, he said as the golden notification panel flashed. Congratulations! The host has defeated 2 Apocrypha stage beings. Rewards, plus 20 million EXP. Congratulations! The host has defeated an Eternity stage being. Rewards, plus 5 million EXP. So the reward for defeating an Apocrypha is 10 million EXP, while an Eternity stage is half of that. Ryuk muttered to himself, keeping it at the back of his mind. Congratulations on completing the secret quest. Keep Princess Elfie safe. Rewards, 1. Plus 2 level up cards. 2. Plus 100,000 purchase points. System Interface 2.0. Name Ryuk Null. Race, Beyonder Dragon. Age, 18. Level, 186. EXP, 279,92000/25 million. Requirements for leveling fulfilled. Does host wish to level up? Yes. Congratulations. Host has leveled up to level 187. Plus 50 attribute points obtained. EXP, 299,2000/36 million. Level up cards possessed. 2. Does host wish to use level up cards? Yes. -1 level up card used. Host has leveled up to level 188. Plus 50 attribute points obtained. -1 level up card used. Host has leveled up to level 189. Plus 50 attribute points obtained. Level up cards left, 0. Attribute panel. Physical dominance, 10,000. Velocis, 10,000. Core stability, 10,000. Mimetic awakening, 10,000. Cosmic gravitas, 5,000. Attribute points, 150. Does host wish to use attribute points? In return, Ryuk looked up and down his stats before he ultimately shook his head. No need. 150 attribute points won't change much at this point, he thought, and the system panel dispersed after. But Ryuk's eyebrow remained knitted. Even after defeating 2 Apocrypha stage beings and an Eternity expert, along with the secret quest, I still only have 150 attribute points, which can't do much to increase my strength. My level is getting too high above the system's delivered attribute inputs. How do I grow stronger? Faster? The only choice now seems to be fighting Exignis stage experts or improving my hurricane cultivation, he muttered to himself with knitted eyebrows. But then he felt a quivering in his eyeball, and immediately a tiny beam of light emerged, on which lay a notification. It was a message from Mrs. Lydia. Message from contact named, Mom, getting late. You coming home tonight or? Ryuk widened the panel, fingers typing a line of letters. I'm almost home already. Message from contact named Mom. Great, just finished preparing dinner. Planning to eat together. But this oldie here is starving. I don't know how long I can hold him back. Hurry. The reply made Ryuk chuckle a bit before the notification dispersed. 20 minutes later. We're here, sir, the Ammonius driver reported. As the bird landed onto the ground, Ryuk got down, bidding the bird goodbye, before walking down the streets. On the way, his senses spread out, looking for any suspicious wave of energy, and when he found none, he branched into a dark corner. There, the void grimoire appeared in his hands as a void vortex was opened up. He instantly disappeared into it, leaving the alleyway in darkness. The sound of knocks on the door rang out. The knob was twisted open, and bubbling at the entrance was none other than Mrs. Lydia with a big smile on her face. "Welcome back," she said, ushering him in. When Ryuk entered, he could already see old Jack, whose hands were moving ultra-fast, dumping dishes and stuffing them into his mouth. "Hey, you!" Mrs. Lydia shouted in shock as old Jack struggled to swallow it all at once before speaking. "Well, he's already back. Isn't he, Linnea? The deal was to wait till he's back. Don't tell me you're planning on going against your word now," he said sleekly, to which Mrs. Linnea could only smile wryly. Eventually, she huffed, ignoring him. It left just Ryuk and old Jack afterward. "What's with the dress? You look like a wannabe clown without a mask," old Jack said, eyeing his outfit, and it finally hit Ryuk. He hadn't changed out of his Victorian uniform from the quest. "Surprisingly enough, they didn't ask me to return it when I was leaving," he thought to himself as he walked toward the table filled with various mouth-watering dishes and dove in too. "Just say you're too broke to get an exclusive dress like this, and in my infinite mercy, I might just buy you a hat," Ryuk replied, dropping his hat to the side. Old Jack murmured mockingly, "Infinite mercy, I might just get you one hat. Yeah, of course, greedy mutt. How's your first day at the service anyway?" he asked, as the memories of the day flew by Ryuk's head. "It was great." "Really? How so?" old Jack asked pessimistically. "I was given a mission to be the personal, trusted guard of a princess, royal born from a mighty angelic royal house who wanted to attend an exclusive nobles-only party," Ryuk said, making it sound as impressive as he could. But all he got was a SOSO shrug from old Jack. "Oh, so you got to be a protection slave for some spoiled princess. Eh? He summarized with mockery, to which Ryuk's expression soured rapidly. "Why did you have to use such uncouth words? Am I wrong? A guard is just a protection slave to whoever he's guarding. And all princesses are spoiled pieces of shit," he said with a shrug. Ryuk chuckled. "You do know your daughter was once a princess, right?" Ryuk said, to which old Jack's expression dropped. "She was. The sound of a throat clearing rang out once more as Jack watched his wife pass across, giving him a murderous stare. He quickly added to Ryuk, "But of course, only the beautiful daughter of Her Majesty Queen Linnea Dominaire is the exception," he said with a bright, shameless smile. "HMPF." Mrs. Linnea huffed in satisfaction before continuing on her way. "Slipped up again?" Ryuk said with a smile of mockery as old Jack turned his furrowed eyebrows on him. "That only happens when you're around me, bloody mutt. It's like my luck suddenly dries up. What's with you and bad luck anyway?" he asked, to which Ryuk shrugged. "I don't have bad luck." "Yeah, I'm thinking so too," old Jack said, and Ryuk paused. You do. Yes, and that leaves you with the only option of absorbing mine to make up for yours. It's the only logical explanation for my slip-ups around you. TSK, and here I thought he was up to some mighty revelation," Ryuk thought disappointedly. "And how did your job as a book arranger go?" he asked, making sure to emphasize the book arranger part. Old Jack shrugged. "Easy, at least." Ryuk paused, expecting more, but all he got was old Jack's blank expression. "Sounds cool," he eventually said with a shrug, diving into his food. A bit of surprise flickered through old Jack's eyes, followed by a smile Ryuk didn't fail to notice. "What's wrong?" he asked. What do you mean what's wrong? I can't smile anymore, old Jack said, watching the young man grin. I don't know the soft smiling old Jack. I remember the grinning one, though, Ryuk said, watching as the grin returned full force. You never fail to amuse me, bloody mutt, Jack said, and in the next instant, the dining table shook heavily, jumping into the air. Hey! Ryuk shouted, gripping his plate, scared it would fall to the ground, but it didn't. Then came the dust, which he quickly pushed aside with his hand. You greedy old bastard, trying to pour my food, he shouted, waving off the dirt. But when the dust cleared, something caught his attention. It was none other than the object old Jack had thrown on the table, which led to it jumping up. Ryuk quieted down when he saw what it was. With furrowed eyebrows, he stretched out his hand toward it. Grimoires? He asked in surprise. Before him were two grimoires stacked on top of each other. One glowed with an iridescent silver-gray hue, and the other shimmered a milky white. What drew the most attention, though, was the fact that each had a gemstone plated into the middle of its cover. These were elemental cores, albeit seemingly low-level, more decorative than powerful. The library was unpacking these old books. Throwing them out, actually, Jack said. But why? Ryuk asked, reaching for one of the books and picking it up. They said they've been there for centuries. No one bothers to read them anymore since they're old materials. I picked them up because, well, I remember your special energy allows you to mimic energy, right? Maybe you could copy the energy from the elemental gem on the cover, and then read about them to gain a deeper grasp on the elements, he explained. In an instant, Ryuk picked up the silver-gray book, and his purple tattoos began to shift color. From a shimmering purple, they ran into an iridescent silver-gray, the same color as the elemental core in the book. Just as I guessed, old Jack said, impressed by the change. He had truly seen the books being disposed of and, at the very last second, decided to take the two whose elemental cores still shone brightly and didn't seem faulty. The other workers didn't care, and since the books were headed to be burned anyway, they didn't mind the new guy picking up some junk. That was how he had gotten them. Ryuk noticed his shifting tattoo, although he didn't feel any real difference in strength or anything. When he turned to the book's cover, he could see the title. Introductory Manual of the Echo Mythic Element? He muttered to himself, before reaching for the second book. The second he touched it, the tattoos changed again. The iridescent silver-gray vanished and was replaced by a soft, milky white glow. So he can't use two elements at once, just one at a time, old Jack thought, noting how the silver-gray hue vanished, replaced entirely by white. When Ryuk picked up the book, he could also read the title. Introductory Manual of the Lantern Mythic Element? Lantern and Echo Elements? He asked aloud. Jack nodded. Weird, right? Yeah. I've never heard of an element called Echo or Lantern. Ryuk mused beneath his breath. Old Jack shrugged. Maybe that's why they were abandoned in the first place. But so far, they adapted to your tattoos, so they must be real elements. Just look through them. I'm curious what they do, he added. Ryuk nodded, and both books disappeared into his shop space. Thanks. And seems like the oldie remembers me even while carrying books around, Ryuk said, not forgetting to rub it in. Old Jack rolled his eyes. Don't die overthinking things, bloody mutt. I won't be dying before you, old man. A deep exhale left his lips as he collapsed onto the bed, bouncing slightly before coming to a stop. His mind was blank for a while, but only for a moment, before the thoughts and sounds surrounding him began drifting back in again. His thoughts returned to the mission of the day, the assassination attempt on a princess from a royal angelic family. If you had been an ordinary archguard, that mission would have been the end of you. The system notification blinked before him, and only now was Ryuk reminded of the dangers he had come across. Any archguard signed up for that simple escort mission would have been at the initial stage of the Apocrypha. And the enemies I faced? One was at the peak of eternity, and two others were also at the Apocrypha stage. What's worse? One of them commanded an illusory art, the kind I was barely able to escape due to the sheer overwhelming power that can only be found in an Exignis stage expert. If I were just an archguard at the initial stage of the Exignis, or if I hadn't fully merged with the power of the Beyonder Dragon, then chances are, I would have struggled to keep my life against enemies at the same level of power as me and possessing mysterious arts, let alone protect Princess Elfie. And if Princess Elfie had died, who knew what would come from failing a loyalty quest? But the easiest I would have gotten off was having my Archguard halo taken away and kicked off the planet. It truly was a close call. That reminds me, Ryuk thought, drifting back to the memories. Back in Endearth, the highest level of power ever reached was Eternity. And when I was at level 1500, no one among Endiarthians could defeat me. But here in Amamora, I've come across up to a dozen individuals at the Apocrypha stage, and this was just from miscellaneous acts. Crossing the Dominaire family elders and taking a simple princess bodyguard loyalty mission. Who knows just how many hidden experts are still out there? What types of insane powers and laws they command? He thought silently. I've always wanted to ask you something, Ryuk. The system panel suddenly blinked, drawing his attention. And what's that? You've gotten rid of your Null and Jade Dragon bloodlines, right? Yes, I have. Are you planning to bring them back? What's your goal now? Do you still want to obtain your body parts? Or have you decided to carve a new path? Like starting afresh here in Amamora? The system asked. Ryuk's gaze unconsciously turned toward the window. The sky of Amamora was visible, lit with a full white moon hanging in a golden twilight background. Silence lingered for a full 5 minutes before Ryuk eventually replied. That's a question I've been trying to avoid, for as long as I can. He muttered quietly, then continued, sharp resolve hardening in his eyes. But as much as I'd like to deny the existence of my Null and Jade Dragon bloodlines, the truth remains I am the Draconis, and those memories in my head, they're real. The dragons who died for the Draconis to live, they definitely would have thought twice about doing so, if they knew. He paused, then continued. If they knew that one day, I'd turn my back on that title, and pretend as if it never happened. That makes a lot of sense. And sometimes, after witnessing the memories, I feel like Uncle Bob might have harbored some hope. What hope? Hope that I'd eventually realize the truth, and return home, not for myself, but to let the daughter of Vel'Ziraka know that he fulfilled her wish. You mean your mother? I don't like that word, Ryuk said. His voice so cold that cracks appeared on the glass panels, and even the breeze outside seemed to pause. Eventually, the coldness in his gaze faded, and he sighed. All of this, these chains, I'm still bound to them, and simply walking away won't break them. The only way to truly break free is to go back, regain the full body that those dragons fought to the death for, and appear before the daughter of Vel'Ziraka. Not so she knows her son is alive, but so she knows her messenger, Bob Zakir, was loyal and completed his quest through to the very end. He sat upright, his fingers curling slowly into a fist, until the sound of space cracking within his enclosed palm startled even him. So now, my focus is still on meeting the sixth calamity, and taking from her whatever she took from me. That's what my main body is focused on. Are you sure they haven't reached there, though? You've been slumbering for months, and according to my internal clock, time over there flows 2.3x faster than here in Amamora. Ryuk shrugged. Void would wake me up if things go haywire. He might be naughty, but not disobedient. But don't you find it strange? The system asked, and Ryuk turned his full attention toward it. What's strange? You do remember your pet world is inside your primordial gate, right? And now that your primordial gate is locked, then there should be no access for Void and Isha, Ryuk muttered, his eyebrows knitting tighter. Exactly. And they haven't tried contacting you, even after what should be 2.5, maybe 3 months in their time zone. Don't you find that just a little bit suspicious? Now that Ryuk thought about it, truly was something worth considering. In the end, he decided, I'll just check up on them swiftly, he said. still lying on the bed, before giving the command. Activate throne shift. But even after 10 seconds of waiting, nothing happened. Ryuk opened one eye, then shut it again and reordered. Activate throne shift. 20 seconds later. What the hell? He screamed in shock. You seem surprised? I wonder why. The system asked smugly, and Ryuk's eyebrow twitched. I seem surprised? Of course I'm surprised. I can't go back to my main body. Obviously. You only have 4 skills, and throne shift, which you got from Morn, a Null King, was under your Nullic skill panel. Since you've erased your Null bloodline, it's no longer accessible. How did you expect it to activate? Ryuk stared blankly at the ceiling. Am I finished? He thought to himself, but then his gaze regained focus. It's true. Throne shift is an ability I got from Morn. But I still have Huriace energy, which can mimic any skill. So long as I can feel it, I should be able to activate it. He fell back against the bed and closed his eyes. He began imagining. As vividly as he could, he tried to remember what it felt like to use throne shift. And after he was sure he had the sensation locked down, throne shift, activate throne shift. He murmured, but even after 10 minutes of whispering the same phrase, and picturing the exact memory, he opened his eyes, only to see the same ceiling staring down at him in mockery. It didn't work? But I got the feelings right. Why isn't it working? He screamed inwardly. The thought of never being able to return to his main body made his breathing worsen, and the room began to reverberate with his rising panic. But just before it got out of hand, the system notification blinked calmly. You're an idiot. Are you sure? I've got 10,000 points in intelligence, remember?